My name is Lucy, and at 34 years old, I never imagined I would be standing in a funeral home staring at the small white casket that held my 8-year-old daughter, Emma. My husband David stood beside me, his hand trembling as it held mine, both of us drowning in the kind of grief that makes breathing feel impossible. 3 days ago, a car accident stole our little girl from us. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Jessica, saying she had moved her housewarming party to today because it was convenient since everyone was already gathered. Before I continue this heartbreaking story, where are you watching from? Please hit like and subscribe if you believe families should support each other through life's darkest moments. Let me share what happened when grief met the ultimate betrayal. Our family had been everything I ever wanted. David and I had been married for 12 years, building our life in a quiet suburb outside Chicago. We lived in a 2-story colonial house with a big backyard where our children played every evening after school. Emma was 8, full of life and laughter, while her older brother Jake had just turned 10. They were inseparable, those two. Every morning, Jake would help Emma tie her shoes before school, and she would sneak extra cookies into his lunchbox when she thought I wasn't looking. I worked as a pediatric nurse at the local children's hospital, a job that felt like my calling. Every day I cared for sick children, helping them heal and bringing comfort to worried parents. David was a software engineer who worked from home most days, allowing him to be there when the kids got off the school bus. We had created a rhythm to our lives that felt perfect in its simplicity. Friday night movies on the couch. Saturday morning pancakes that Emma insisted on helping make, even though more batter ended up on her pajamas than in the pan, and Sunday trips to the park, where Jake would push Emma on the swings until she squealed with joy. Emma was extraordinary in the way that all children are extraordinary to their parents, but she truly had a spark that drew people to her. She had started ballet classes when she was 4, and her teacher often commented on her natural grace and determination. Her room was filled with tutus in every color of the rainbow, and she would practice her positions in front of the mirror, her face serious with concentration. But her real passion was art. She could spend hours with her colored pencils and paints creating elaborate pictures of our family, always drawing us holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Jake was the protective big brother, always looking out for Emma at school, making sure nobody picked on his little sister. They had built a fort in the basement out of old sheets and cardboard boxes, their secret hideaway, where they would read books and share secrets. Sometimes I would hear them down there, Jake reading Harry Potter aloud, while Emma drew pictures of the characters. Their bond was something special, something I had always hoped my children would have. My relationship with my younger sister Jessica was complicated in the way that many sibling relationships are when parents play favorites. Jessica was 5 years younger than me, 29 years old, working as a marketing manager at a tech startup downtown. Growing up, she had been the baby of the family, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. When I got straight A's in high school, they would nod approvingly, but when Jessica got a B+, they would throw a celebration dinner. When I graduated from nursing school, they came to the ceremony, took a few pictures, and left early. When Jessica got her bachelor's degree in communications, they rented out a restaurant and invited 50 people. I had learned early to accept this dynamic, telling myself that younger children often need more attention, more support. I became the responsible one, the one who never caused problems, never asked for too much. When Jessica wrecked her car in college because she was texting while driving, I was the one who drove 3 hours to pick her up, dealt with the insurance, and convinced our parents not to be too harsh on her. When she lost her job 2 years ago because she had been caught lying on her expense reports, I was the one who helped her with her resume and put in a good word with a friend who was hiring. Despite everything, I loved my sister. I kept hoping that as we got older, as she matured, our relationship would evolve into something more balanced. When she started dating Marcus 2 years ago, I thought maybe this would be the change she needed. Marcus was stable, kind, worked as an accountant, and seemed to genuinely care about Jessica. When they announced 6 months ago that they had bought a house together in a trendy downtown neighborhood, I was genuinely happy for her. Jessica had been planning her housewarming party for 2 months. She had created a Pinterest board dedicated to it, filled with ideas for decorations, menu items, and party favors. She talked about it constantly, how this party would be her way of showing everyone that she had finally made it, that she was a real adult, with a real house and a real future. The party was scheduled for Saturday the 15th, and she had sent out elegant invitations to 70 people. She had hired a caterer, a bartender, even a small jazz band. This was going to be her moment to shine. Wednesday started like any other day. I had worked an early shift at the hospital, getting home by 3 in the afternoon. Emma had stayed after school for art club, and my mother Barbara had volunteered to pick her up and bring her home. Mom loved spending time with the grandchildren, especially Emma, who reminded her of herself as a child. They were driving back on Route 47, stopped at a red light near the intersection of Main Street when it happened. The teenager in the pickup truck behind them was looking at his phone. He never saw the red light, never hit the brakes. The impact at 50 miles per hour crushed the rear of my mother's sedan, pushing it into the intersection where it was hit again by another vehicle. By the time the paramedics arrived, Emma was unconscious. My mother was screaming in pain with multiple fractures. They were rushed to my hospital, a cruel irony that the place where I saved other people's children would be where I would lose my own. I was updating charts at the nurse's station when I heard the trauma code called. It was routine for me, something I responded to multiple times a week. But then I heard someone say the victims' names, and the world tilted off its axis. I ran to the trauma bay, my colleagues trying to stop me, trying to prevent me from seeing what no mother should see. But I pushed past them, needing to be with my baby. Emma was so small on that table, surrounded by doctors and nurses. I knew people I had worked beside for years. They worked on her for 2 hours, doing everything medical science could do. But the internal injuries were too severe, the damage too great. When they finally stopped, when the attending physician looked at me with tears in his eyes and shook his head, I collapsed onto my daughter. I held her tiny body still warm, her hair still smelling like the strawberry shampoo she loved. I kissed her forehead, whispered how much I loved her, how sorry I was that I couldn't save her. David arrived 20 minutes later with Jake, and the sound that came from our son when he saw his sister will haunt me forever. It was primal, a keening wail of loss that no 10-year-old should ever have to make. The next few hours passed in a blur of horror and disbelief. My mother was in surgery for her injuries, multiple fractures in her legs and ribs, a punctured lung, but she would survive. The physical injuries would heal. Though we all knew the emotional trauma of being the driver when Emma died would never fully leave her. The hospital staff, my coworkers and friends, surrounded us with support, but nothing could penetrate the fog of grief that had descended. Jessica arrived at the hospital 3 hours after Emma died. David had called her multiple times, leaving increasingly urgent messages, but she had been in a client meeting and had her phone turned off. When she finally walked into the family waiting room where we sat with Jake, still in shock, still unable to fully comprehend that Emma was gone, her first words weren't of comfort or sorrow. She looked at us, at our tear-stained faces, at Jake curled up in David's lap like he hadn't been since he was 5, and said those words I will never forget. Oh my God, this is terrible. But it wasn't the words themselves that cut through my grief like a blade. It was how she said them, flat, almost annoyed, like we had inconvenienced her by having this tragedy on a Wednesday afternoon. Her eyes were dry, not a single tear for the niece who had adored her, who had made her handmade birthday cards every year, who had called her Aunt Jessie and lit up whenever she visited. Then came the question that should have warned me about what was to come. Lucy, the funeral. Won't be this Saturday, will it? Because you know I have my housewarming party. I've already paid the deposits for everything. David had to physically restrain me from lunging at her. He explained, his voice hollow with exhaustion, that we were planning the funeral for Saturday morning, that it was the soonest we could arrange everything that we needed to bury our daughter. Jessica actually sighed with relief. Good, she said, checking her phone. I was worried about the catering deposit. They have a really strict cancellation policy. The party starts at 2, so as long as the funeral is in the morning, there shouldn't be any conflict. She looked up from her phone, seemed to finally notice our expressions, and added, I mean, it's sad about Emma, of course. But life goes on, right? We can't just stop everything. The next 2 days were spent in a haze of funeral preparations that no parent should ever have to make. David and I picked out a small white casket with painted butterflies, because Emma had been obsessed with butterflies ever since she learned about metamorphosis in science class. We chose her favorite dress, the purple one with the tulle skirt that she wore to her spring dance recital. Jake helped us select the music, including the song from Frozen that Emma sang constantly, even though it made us all cry every time we heard it now. Jake had moved into our bedroom, unable to sleep in the room next to Emma's empty bed. He would wake up screaming for her, forgetting for those first cruel seconds that she was gone, then remembering and sobbing into my chest. He refused to eat, refused to go to school, refused to leave Emma's room during the day. He sat on her bed holding her favorite stuffed elephant, looking through the photo album she had made of their adventures together. Our friends and community rallied around us. My colleagues from the hospital set up a meal train so we wouldn't have to think about cooking. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, came by with a box of Emma's artwork from school and a card signed by all her classmates. The parents from her ballet class pooled together to make a donation to the Children's Hospital in Emma's name. The owner of the art supply store where Emma and I shopped every Saturday morning brought over a framed piece of Emma's artwork that she had submitted to their monthly contest, a picture of our family standing in front of a rainbow that she had titled, "My Forever People." But through all of this support, all of this kindness from virtual strangers, my own parents remained oddly distant. My father, Robert, had come to the hospital briefly, patted my shoulder awkwardly, and spent most of his visit comforting my mother about her injuries and assuring her that the accident wasn't her fault. Neither of them came to the house. Neither of them helped with the funeral arrangements. Neither of them offered to sit with Jake, so David and I could handle the overwhelming logistics of death. When I called my mother in her hospital room to tell her the funeral details, her main concern was whether Jessica would be upset about the timing. "You know how hard your sister has worked for this party, Lucy. She's been planning it for months. Maybe you could consider Sunday for the funeral instead." When I explained that we had already made all the arrangements, that Saturday was when it needed to be, she sighed heavily. "Just try not to make it too long, dear. People have other commitments." I couldn't sleep Thursday night. I sat at the kitchen table trying to write a eulogy for my daughter, trying to find words that could possibly capture who Emma had been in her 8 short years. How could I explain the way she would dance in the rain, insisting that the flowers needed to see happy people? How could I describe the sound of her laughter when Jake would tell her silly jokes, or the way she would crawl into our bed during thunderstorms, not because she was scared, but because she didn't want us to be lonely? How could I make anyone understand that the world had lost not just a child, but a bright light that had made everything around her more beautiful? David found me there at 4 a.m, surrounded by crumpled papers and used tissues. He pulled me into his arms and we cried together, the kind of crying that comes from the deepest part of your soul, the kind that leaves you empty and aching. We talked about Emma sharing memories like precious gems, each one beautiful and painful. We talked about how Jake would survive this, how we would survive this, how our family would ever find a way forward with this Emma-shaped hole in our hearts. Friday evening, the night before the funeral, my phone rang. It was Jessica, and for a brief moment I hoped she was calling to offer support, to ask how she could help to be the sister I needed. Instead, her cheerful voice delivered another blow to my already shattered heart. "Great news, Lucy. I've managed to move my housewarming party to Saturday. Can you believe it? It actually works out perfectly. Since all the family is already coming to town for the morning thing with Emma, they can just come straight to my party after. It's way more convenient this way. No one has to make 2 separate trips. I already sent out the updated invitations." I couldn't speak. I literally couldn't form words. David saw my face, took the phone from my trembling hand. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. Jessica repeated herself, adding more details about how efficient this was, how smart she was to think of it. David exploded. "Are you insane? We're burying our daughter tomorrow morning. Our 8-year-old daughter, your niece, and you want to throw a party the same day?" Jessica's tone turned defensive, then angry. "Look, I get that you're upset, but Emma won't know the difference anyway. She's gone. But I'm still here, And I've worked hard for this house, for this life. Why should I have to sacrifice my celebration because of your tragedy? It's not like the party is at the same time. The funeral is at 9. My party starts at 2. That's 5 hours in between. People need something positive after all that sadness anyway. I grabbed the phone back from David, finally finding my voice. Jessica, I am begging you. Please don't do this. Please. Just this once, think about someone other than yourself. My baby is dead. Do you understand that Emma is dead? She's never coming home. She'll never dance again, never paint again, never hug me again. And you want to celebrate your house on the same day. We put her in the ground. There was silence on the other end, and for a moment I thought maybe I had reached her, maybe she understood. Then she spoke, her voice cold. You've always been jealous of me, Lucy. Always trying to make everything about you. This is my moment, my achievement, and you can't stand it. Mom and Dad understand. They think it's a good idea. They're coming to both. At least they know how to support all their children, not just the dead one. She hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, unable to comprehend the cruelty of what had just happened. David was pacing the room, his fists clenched, saying words I had never heard him say before. Jake appeared in the doorway, his thin frame in Emma's favorite Pokemon pajamas that he had taken from her room. Did Aunt Jessie really say that about Emma? He asked, his voice small and broken. My phone started buzzing with notifications. Jessica had added the new invitation to the family group chat, the one with all our aunts and uncles and cousins. Due to a scheduling convenience, I've moved my housewarming celebration to this Saturday afternoon. Following the morning's obligations, please join me at 2 p.m. for an afternoon of joy and new beginnings. Dress code is cocktail attire. Please RSVP by tonight. The responses started coming in immediately. Confusion from most asking if this was a mistake, if she really meant this Saturday. Jessica responded to each one cheerfully. Yes, this Saturday. After Lucy's minor event in the morning. It makes more sense for everyone's schedules. The word minor echoed in my head. She had called my daughter's funeral a minor event. My Aunt Martha, my mother's older sister, called immediately. Honey, I'm seeing something in the family chat that can't possibly be real. Please tell me Jessica isn't doing what I think she's doing. When I confirmed that yes, my sister was throwing a party on the day of Emma's funeral, Martha's fury was volcanic. That little selfish witch. And where are your parents in all this? How could Barbara allow this? That's when my mother called. Lucy, you need to calm down. You're making this into something it's not. Jessica has been planning this for months. The deposits are non-refundable. She's already told her friends, her coworkers. It would be embarrassing for her to cancel now. The funeral is in the morning, the party is in the afternoon. There's no actual conflict. You're being overly emotional because of your grief, which is understandable, but you can't expect the whole world to stop because of your loss. Mom. I whispered, my voice breaking. Emma was your granddaughter. She loved you so much. She died in your car holding the art project she had made for you. How can you think about Jessica's party right now? How can you choose her housewarming over honoring Emma? Barbara's voice turned sharp. I'm not choosing anyone over anyone. I'm being practical. Life goes on, Lucy. Yes, it's sad about Emma, but Jessica is my daughter too, and she needs my support. She's been looking forward to this, and frankly, after the depression of the morning, people will welcome something celebratory. You need to think about others, not just yourself. I hung up on my mother for the first time in my life. David held me while I sobbed, not just from grief now, but from the devastating realization that my family, the people who should have been supporting us through the worst loss imaginable, were instead inflicting additional wounds. Jake climbed into our laps, and the three of us held each other, our little broken family, against the world. The group chat continued to explode through the night. Some family members were openly appalled, saying they would never attend a party on the day of a child's funeral. Others shockingly sided with Jessica, saying it was practical, that it would be nice to have something happy after something so sad. The family was dividing before our eyes, and all I could think was that Emma's death should have brought us together, not torn us apart. Saturday morning arrived, gray and drizzly, as if the sky itself was mourning. David, Jake, and I arrived at the funeral home at 8:30. The small chapel could hold 100 people, but as 9 o'clock approached, only 30 seats were filled. My colleagues from the hospital were there, Emma's teacher and some parents from her class, our neighbors David's family who had driven from Michigan. But so many family members were absent, and I knew why. They were saving their energy, their emotional bandwidth for Jessica's party. At 9:10, Jessica walked in. She was 20 minutes late to her 8-year-old niece's funeral, and she was wearing a bright red cocktail dress. Not black, not navy, not even a subdued color. Red. The dress she had bought specifically for her party, because she couldn't be bothered to change between events. She clicked down the aisle in her heels, her phone in her hand, and slid into the pew behind my parents who had arrived just moments before. The funeral director nodded to me. It was time. I stood at the podium, looking out at the sparse crowd at my sister checking her phone at my parents, who kept glancing at their watches. I looked at the small white casket covered in pink roses and baby's breath, and I began to speak. Emma Grace Thompson was 8 years old. She loved butterflies and rainbows, ballet and art. She gave the best hugs in the world, the kind that made you feel like you were the most important person in the universe. She had a laugh that could brighten the darkest day, and a smile that could heal any hurt. She was the best little sister Jake could have asked for, and the daughter David and I had dreamed of our entire lives. I talked about her first day of kindergarten, how she had marched into the classroom without a backward glance, then run out at pickup time and jumped into my arms saying she had been brave, but she missed me every minute. I talked about her first ballet recital, how she had forgotten the steps halfway through, but kept dancing anyway, making up her own moves and grinning at the audience. I talked about the Mother's Day card she had made me just 2 weeks ago with a drawing of us holding hands and the words, "You are my best mommy in the whole world, even when you make me eat broccoli." Halfway through my eulogy, as I was describing Emma's last art project, a painting of our family she had titled, "Love Lives Here," Jessica stood up. She didn't try to be subtle. She gathered her purse, whispered something to my mother, and walked out. Her heels echoed in the chapel as she left the door closing with a thud that reverberated through the space. Several people gasped. Jake started crying harder. David's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. I continued speaking, my voice stronger now, fueled by a mixture of grief and growing anger. I talked about how Emma had wanted to be an art teacher when she grew up, how she planned to have a classroom full of butterflies and teach kids that mistakes were just happy accidents, waiting to become something beautiful. I talked about her kindness, how she would share her lunch with classmates who forgot theirs, how she would pick flowers for elderly neighbors, how she would tell everyone she met that they were beautiful. When it came time for others to speak, Jake stood up. My brave boy in his too big suit that we had to buy because he had nothing appropriate for his sister's funeral, walked to the podium. Emma was the best sister, he said, his voice small but clear. She would let me read to her even when I picked boring books. She would give me her dessert when I had a bad day. She would hold my hand when I was scared. She promised she would always be my best friend. I don't know how to be a big brother without a little sister. I don't know how to be Jake without Emma. There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel except for my parents, who seemed more concerned with the time than with their grandson's heartbreak. As we prepared for the final viewing, my mother leaned over and whispered, "Lucy, wrap this up. People have places to be. Jessica needs help setting up." I turned to look at her, really look at her, and saw a stranger. This woman who had raised me, who I had loved and tried so hard to please my entire life, was a stranger who cared more about party preparations than her granddaughter's funeral. The burial was even smaller. Only 15 people came to the cemetery. My parents left immediately after the casket was lowered, my father muttering something about helping Jessica with the sound system. They didn't stay to see the butterflies we released, a surprise David had arranged, because Emma had always said butterflies were messages from heaven. They didn't stay to hear Emma's ballet teacher sing the song from Emma's last recital. They didn't stay to support their surviving grandchild, who stood at his sister's grave refusing to leave. As we finally walked back to our car, Jake between us holding both our hands, my phone buzzed. Jessica had sent a photo to the family group chat. Her house was decorated with balloons and flowers, a banner reading New Beginnings stretched across the living room. Thanks for keeping it short. Party starts at 2. Can't wait to celebrate with everyone. She had added champagne bottle and party hat emojis. The next message was a series of photos. The catered spread of food, the professional bartenders setting up the jazz band, tuning their instruments. Each photo was like another knife in my heart. My daughter was being lowered into the ground and my sister was posting party preparations. The final photo showed my parents. My own parents smiling and holding champagne glasses, already at her house, already celebrating while dirt was still being placed on Emma's grave. David drove us home in silence. Jake sat in the back seat, clutching the program from the funeral, Emma's picture smiling up from the cover. When we pulled into our driveway, I made a decision. Get changed, I told them both. We're going to that party. David looked at me like I had lost my mind. Lucy, no. We don't need to do this. We don't need to subject ourselves to more pain. But I was already walking into the house, already formulating a plan. I wasn't going to let Emma's memory be diminished. I wasn't going to let my sister turn my daughter's funeral day into her personal celebration without consequences. I put on the black dress I had worn to the funeral home, the one I had taken off thinking I would never have to wear again. I gathered the photo album I had made for Emma's funeral, filled with pictures of her short but beautiful life. I took the framed painting Emma had done of our family, the one she had been so proud of. I grabbed the memorial cards from the funeral. Jake, understanding what I was doing, went to his room and came back with Emma's favorite tiara, the one she wore when she played princess. Are you sure about this? David asked, but he was already putting on his suit jacket. I looked at my husband, my partner in this unimaginable grief, and nodded. Emma deserved better than being called a minor event. She deserved to be remembered properly, even if we have to force them to remember. The drive to Jessica's house took 30 minutes. 30 minutes of me practicing what I would say. 30 minutes of Jake in the back seat saying, "Mommy, make them understand about Emma." 30 minutes of David reaching over to squeeze my hand every time he saw me wavering. When we arrived at Jessica's trendy neighborhood, we could hear the party from the street. Music, laughter, the sound of celebration that felt like a mockery of the morning's sorrow. We walked up to the front door, which was propped open with a welcome sign. The house was full of people, at least 50 guests, all dressed in cocktail attire, all holding drinks, all laughing and chatting, as if this was just another Saturday afternoon. The jazz band was playing something upbeat. Servers were circulating with appetizers. Jessica was in the center of it all, now changed into an even more elaborate dress, holding court as people admired her house. The moment we walked in, the energy shifted. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The cousin who had been laughing at something on his phone looked up and went pale. The aunt who had been complimenting Jessica's decor froze with her champagne glass halfway to her lips. Someone turned off the music. In the sudden silence, our footsteps seemed impossibly loud as we walked into the center of the room. Jessica's face went from confused to furious in seconds. "What are you doing here? This is my party. You need to leave. Now." She started walking toward us, but I held up my hand, and something in my expression must have stopped her because she actually took a step back. I looked around the room at all these people, family members, and Jessica's friends all dressed up and ready to celebrate while my daughter lay in the ground. I opened the photo album and held up the first picture, Emma on her first day of school. "This is Emma," I said, my voice carrying through the silent room. She was 8 years old and she died 4 days ago. She was not a minor event. She was not an inconvenience. She was a little girl who loved butterflies and ballet, who made everyone around her smile, who had her whole life ahead of her. I flipped to the next page, Emma at her ballet recital. This was taken 3 weeks ago. She was so proud of her costume she slept in it the night before the show. She made me promise to sit in the front row so she could see me if she got scared. She wasn't scared. She was magnificent. Some of Jessica's friends were crying now, whether from awkwardness or genuine emotion, I didn't know and didn't care. Page after page, I showed them Emma. Emma painting her face covered in watercolors. Emma and Jake building a snowman last winter. Emma helping David cook dinner standing on a stool to reach the counter. Emma hugging my mother, the grandmother who had left her funeral early to set up for this party. Emma at last year's Christmas, sitting on Jessica's lap, looking at her aunt with pure adoration, the aunt who had called her death a minor event. My daughter died on Wednesday, I continued, my voice growing stronger. She died scared and in pain, and the last thing she said was that she wanted her mommy. We buried her this morning in a cemetery where she'll be alone in the dark, and my sister thought it was appropriate to throw a party. My parents thought it was more important to be here celebrating a house than to stand by their daughter and grandson, as we said goodbye to Emma. I turned to my parents who were standing frozen by the kitchen island. Mom. Dad. Emma loved you. She talked about you all the time. She was making you a painting for your anniversary, a picture of your house with hearts all around it. She died in Mom's car holding the art project she had made at school. A butterfly made of tissue paper with the words, "I love my grandma," written in glitter. And you left her funeral to come here to drink champagne and celebrate while we put her in the ground. My mother started to speak, probably to defend herself, but I wasn't done. I turned to Jessica, who was standing there in her designer dress in her perfect house, surrounded by her party that was more important than her niece's memory. You called my daughter's funeral a minor event. You told me that Emma wouldn't know the difference anyway. Let me tell you what Emma knew. She knew that her Aunt Jessie was special, that she was someone to look up to, someone to love. She made you a Valentine this year that said, "You're the best aunt in the universe." She was saving her allowance to buy you a housewarming present, a picture frame that said, "Home is where love lives," because she wanted you to be happy in your new house. Jake stepped forward, then holding Emma's tiara. This was Emma's favorite, he said, his voice clear despite his tears. She would wear it and say she was a princess who made people happy. She would have worn it to your party, Aunt Jessie. She would have danced to your music and told everyone how pretty your house was. She would have been so proud of you. But you couldn't even stay for her whole funeral. You couldn't even pretend to care that she's gone. The room was completely silent except for the sound of crying. Several of Jessica's co-workers were backing toward the door, clearly horrified at the situation. Marcus, Jessica's boyfriend, was staring at her with an expression I had never seen before, like he was seeing her for the first time and not liking what he saw. "This is ridiculous," Jessica finally sputtered. "You're ruining my party with your drama. Emma is dead. Nothing we do will bring her back. I'm sorry she's gone, but life moves on. I worked hard for this house, for this life, and I deserve to celebrate it. Get out. Get out of my house now." That's when Aunt Martha spoke up. She had been standing in the corner, and now she moved forward, her voice shaking with rage. "I have never been more ashamed to be part of this family. A child has died, a beautiful, innocent child, and you're all standing here with your drinks and your small talk, like this is acceptable. Barbara Robert, how dare you abandon your daughter and grandson for this? How dare you prioritize a party over their grief?" More people started speaking up. Emma's art teacher, who I hadn't even noticed was there, set down her drink and walked over to us. "I came because I didn't know," she said quietly. "I thought this was a different day. I'm so sorry. Emma was a gift and she deserved better than this." David's brother, who had driven 5 hours for the funeral, looked around the room with disgust. "We have a word for people like you in Michigan," he said to Jessica. "But I won't say it in front of my nephew." One by one, people started leaving. Some stopped to hug us, to apologize, to share a memory of Emma. Others just left unable to handle the awkwardness or the shame. Within 15 minutes, the party of 50 had dwindled to 8. Jessica was screaming now, blaming us for ruining everything, for destroying her special day. My parents stood there, my father silent, my mother trying to salvage the situation by suggesting everyone should calm down and have some food since it was already paid for. Marcus was the one who delivered the final blow. He walked up to Jessica, pulled off the engagement ring none of us had known she was wearing, and set it on the table. "I can't do this," he said. I can't marry someone who would do this to their own family, who would call a child's death a minor event. This is sick, Jessica. There's something really wrong with you. He looked at us, his eyes full of apologies, then walked out. Jessica turned on me, then her face twisted with rage. You did this. You turned everyone against me. You've always been jealous, always trying to make me look bad. You and your perfect little family always rubbing it in my face. Well, now your family isn't so perfect, is it? Now you're just as miserable as you've always wanted me to be. I looked at my sister, this person I had protected and defended my entire life, and felt nothing but pity. Jessica, I'm not miserable because Emma died, though that grief will never leave me. I'm heartbroken because I've lost my entire family today. Not just Emma, but you, Mom, Dad. You've shown me who you really are, and it's not anyone I want in my life or in Jake's life. I turned to my parents one last time. Emma deserved grandparents who would mourn her properly, who would honor her memory, who would support her surviving family. Instead, she got you. And that's a loss I'll mourn alongside losing her, because the grandparents she thought loved her never really existed. We left then, walking out of that house with our heads high. Jake held both our hands, and as we reached the door, he turned back one last time. Emma would forgive you, he said to the room. She would forgive all of you because she was good and kind and full of love. But I won't. I'll remember this forever, how you chose a party over my sister. In the car, something strange happened. The crushing weight on my chest lifted just a little. Not the grief that would never leave, but the additional burden of trying to please people who didn't deserve it, of maintaining relationships that were toxic, of accepting less than we deserved. David reached over and took my hand. You were incredible, he said. Emma would be so proud. The next few hours were surreal. My phone exploded with messages from the party guests, most expressing shock and sympathy. Several of Jessica's coworkers reached out to say they had no idea about the funeral, that Jessica had told them it was just a regular housewarming. The story spread quickly through social media after someone who had been at the party posted about it. By evening, Jessica was being torn apart online, called heartless, narcissistic, inhuman. My Aunt Martha came to our house that evening with several other family members who had refused to attend the party once they understood what was happening. They brought food, flowers, and most importantly, their presents. They sat with us, shared memories of Emma, cried with us, and promised that the family Jessica had divided would rebuild itself around those who understood what really mattered. That night, as we lay in bed with Jake between us, all of us needing the closeness, the physical reminder that we still had each other, David asked what we would do about my parents and Jessica. Tomorrow, we'll start making changes, I said. We'll move away from here, start fresh somewhere without these memories, without these toxic people. We'll create our own family, one that honors Emma's memory properly. Jake looked up at me with eyes so much like Emma's it took my breath away. Mom, can we start a foundation or something for kids who like art like Emma did? Maybe help kids who can't afford art supplies or classes. The idea was perfect, so perfectly, Emma using something beautiful to help others. Yes, baby, we can absolutely do that. The Emma Grace Foundation. She would love that. The first week after the funeral and the disastrous party was the hardest. We had to navigate not just our grief, but the explosion of family drama that followed. Jessica tried to do damage control posting on social media that we had ambushed her, that we were using Emma's death to attack her success. But too many people had been there, had seen what really happened. Her company launched an investigation after several clients complained about the situation going viral. The reputational damage was severe. My mother called repeatedly, alternating between guilt trips and anger. How could you humiliate your sister like that? How could you make us look so bad in front of everyone? She never once asked how we were doing, how Jake was coping, if we needed anything. My father sent one text. Your mother is very upset. That was the extent of his acknowledgement of everything that had happened. But for every family member we lost, we gained support from unexpected places. Emma's school held a memorial assembly and hundreds of people showed up. Her art teacher helped us gather Emma's work to create a memorial exhibit. The local news picked up the story of the Emma Grace Foundation and donations poured in from strangers touched by her story. We raised enough in the first month to sponsor art programs in 3 elementary schools. Jake slowly began to heal, though his way of grieving broke my heart daily. He would set a place for Emma at dinner, saying she might be hungry wherever she was. He recorded himself reading Harry Potter chapters on my phone so Emma could hear the rest of the story. He wore one of her friendship bracelets every day, the one she had made for him that said, "Best brother ever." Therapy helped, but the pain of losing his sister, his best friend, would shape him forever. David and I grew closer through our shared grief. We talked about Emma, constantly afraid that if we stopped, we might forget something precious about her. We went to couples therapy to learn how to navigate loss together, how to honor Emma while still living for Jake, for each other, for ourselves. Some days were impossible, where getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. Other days we could smile at a memory without crying, could see a butterfly without falling apart. 3 months after the funeral, we moved to Colorado. David found a job there, and we needed the fresh start, the distance from everything painful. We bought a house with a view of the mountains, something Emma would have loved to paint. Jake started at a new school where nobody knew his story, where he could choose when and how to share about his sister. We hung Emma's artwork throughout the house, making her a constant presence in our new life. The Emma Grace Foundation grew beyond our wildest dreams. We partnered with children's hospitals to bring art therapy to sick kids. We funded after-school art programs in underprivileged areas. We created scholarships for young artists. Every child we helped felt like a way to keep Emma's spirit alive, her belief that everyone could create something beautiful if given the chance. 6 months after Emma's death, my father reached out. He had left my mother, he said. The party. The way she had acted, the way she had continued to defend Jessica and blame us, had finally opened his eyes to the dynamics he had enabled for years. He wanted to be part of Jake's life, wanted to help with the foundation, wanted to try to repair what was broken. It was too little too late for complete forgiveness, but we slowly began building something new, something healthier. My mother never apologized. She and Jessica found comfort in each other's narcissism, reinforcing their victim narratives. I heard through family that Jessica had lost her job, that Marcus had moved out of state, that the house she had been so proud of was now a reminder of the worst decision she had ever made. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, just sadness that she had chosen a party over family pride, over love. A year after Emma's death, on what would have been her 9th birthday, we held a butterfly release at the local children's hospital. Hundreds of people came, many who had never met Emma, but had been touched by her story. Jake read a poem he had written about sisters who become butterflies, watching over their brothers from the sky. David spoke about how Emma's death had taught us to value what really mattered, to never take a single day for granted. I stood there watching monarchs fill the sky and thought about the journey we had taken. The betrayal by my family had nearly broken me on top of losing Emma, but it had also freed me. Freed me from toxic relationships, from constantly seeking approval that would never come from accepting less than we deserved. Emma's death was a tragedy that would mark us forever, but the love she had given us, the love we had for her, that was stronger than any betrayal. As the butterflies disappeared into the distance, Jake tugged on my hand. Mom, do you think Emma knows we stood up for her? Do you think she knows we didn't let them forget her? I pulled him close, this brave boy who had lost so much, but still had so much love to give. She knows, baby. She knows we fought for her memory, and will keep fighting for it every single day. Looking back now, I realize that the housewarming party on the day of Emma's funeral was a gift in the cruelest way. It showed us who truly deserved to be in our lives, who understood that love means showing up when it's hardest, not just when it's convenient. It taught us that family isn't about blood, it's about choice, about choosing to support each other through the unimaginable. Some say blood is thicker than water, and I learned that water can cleanse wounds that blood relations inflict. Emma may be gone, but the love she deserved finally found its voice when I stood up to those who diminished her memory. In honoring her properly, I finally honored myself. And in teaching Jake to stand up for what's right, Even when it's family that's wrong, I honored the mother Emma believed me to be. The Emma Grace Foundation continues to grow. We've helped thousands of children discover the joy of creating art, just like Emma did. Every painting, every drawing, every small masterpiece created by a child who might not have had the chance otherwise, that's Emma's legacy. Not a minor event, but a major impact on the world, one colorful creation at a time. To those watching who have experienced loss, who have faced betrayal from those who should support you, know this: your grief is valid, your loved one's memory deserves respect, and you have the right to demand both. Don't let anyone diminish your pain or rush your healing. And to those who haven't experienced such loss, remember that when someone is grieving, they need your presence, not your party. They need your support, not your schedule. They need your love, not your judgment. What would you have done if your family chose a celebration over your child's funeral? Have you ever had to cut off toxic family members to protect your peace? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to honor Emma's memory and all the children gone too soon. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to stand up for what's right, even when family is wrong. Thank you for listening to our story. And may you always choose love, choose kindness, and choose to honor those who can no longer speak for themselves. Until next time, hold your loved ones closer, tell them you love them more, and never take a single moment for granted.